I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a returned guest, returned visit. He wasn't on that long ago, but he's been predicting the economic cycles, geopolitical and economic cycles through his economic confidence models. He says people just aren't ready to look at the cycles and say, here's what's going on. And obviously, we're on some inflection point in the cycle, but we'll get that from Martin Armstrong. Martin Armstrong, you were world-renowned cycle analyst for geopolitical and economic cycles in your economic confidence model. Martin Armstrong, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Greg.
Well, we're, listen, the stock market is sky high. We just hit a record all-time high on the Dow and every other index, and yet they're cutting interest rates. I mean, something doesn't jive, right? You've got a great economy, but we need to cut rates. What's going on?
It's really the world economy outside the United States, which is in serious trouble. I mean, you really have to look at closely. Pay attention to the words that Powell said. I mean, the economy is strong, unemployment's fine. Why would you cut interest rates when the stock market's at making highs? And he says basically because of things outside the country. And the Fed is, as I've said before, has become like the central bank for the world. It's lost the power to even control domestic policy objectives, and they're being pushed aside by international. And this is the real problem. I mean, Europe is a complete basket case, and they don't get it. They keep trying to hold on to their power and punish anybody that disagrees with them. I mean, just look at what they're doing to Switzerland. They're trying, basically saying, okay, fine, Europeans can't trade stocks, Swiss stocks on any other exchange outside of Switzerland. They're going to try, do that to the same, extent with Britain. What are they actually doing? They're destroying the European economy completely. These people think that they can just, take a pen, write a law, and that's it. And they don't get it. They really don't. And look, the new leaders they got coming in, I mean, you have Lagarde going to replace Draghi. I mean, what's her shtick? I mean, she's basically saying, oh, okay, fine. Well, the only way to make the negative interest rates work, we have to eliminate all cash so people can't hoard money. Instead of saying, look, 10 years of quantitative easing has completely failed, they will never admit a mistake. It's always our fault. It's go get somebody else because they're the ones that are preventing us from accomplishing this. And it's just a complete disaster.
And now they come out and they're going to, and this met with the U.S. media, because I don't watch the foreign media, but I know you were over in Rome not long ago. But this they just announced 2.9 trillion euro bond buying program, and everybody went, ooh, 2.9 trillion bond buying. Yay. What? I mean, what are they? I mean, that's just like printing 2.9 trillion euro, is it not?
Look, it's what's happening is that the central banks are trapped. And I mean, a lot of these people keep bashing the Fed, et cetera. They don't understand the Fed is really different than the ECB or all central banks are not, created equal. The ECB can actually go bankrupt.
Ooh.
It has to go back to seek funding to be able to do this. And when you get all, 28 members and they start disagreeing, they cut off the funding to the ECB because they're going to have to go back and say, give us more, give us more, give us more. I mean, they already own about almost 50% of the entire debt of Europe. And people don't quite understand it. You have the Fed basically said that they were going to allow whatever they had purchased to just simply mature and expire. They weren't going to buy or roll it. The ECB can't do that. The ECB realizes they bought so much debt. If they don't roll that, and they allowed it to mature, and then those governments have to go back to the market to try to sell that debt again, interest rates are going to absolutely explode. So all they've done is kept the European governments on life support. That's it. And you're getting a huge divergence between private and public sector debt. It's just really huge. And it's only going to get worse.
Could the ECB take down the global economy?
Oh, absolutely. Look, this is what's happening. Why is the U.S. economy so good? Why is the Dow at record highs? China's in trouble. Europe's in trouble. Japan's a basket case. The capital's coming here. You had all these people, jumping up and down, all Bitcoin, Bitcoin. Just look at the analysis. 80% plus of the volume was China. Why? Because the Chinese figured out what they could do is buy Bitcoin, use that to get the money out of the country, and then sell it on the other side because they couldn't wire out their own money. That's why the central bank of China called in all the people from Bitcoin and said, hey, wait a minute, this has got to stop. They used it for money laundering, basically. And, this is a lot of the concern on the cryptocurrency. You have, Trump coming out and actually rightfully so, against Facebook and warning that if you're going to create a currency, supposedly, and allow people to store money in it, then you are a bank. So you're going to have to comply with banking regulations. You can't just do this off the cuff. And that's where we're headed. Cryptocurrency is not a currency. It's just another medium, like any other commodity or whatever to trade or park money in or whatever. But it's not currency. You can't go down to your local store and buy, food with it. So, it's a slightly different, animal as far as investment's concerned. That's all.
You got the entire world, including the Fed, who's evidently, as you said, freaked out because of the periphery around the Fed, outside the country. But everybody is going to cut rates all they can. There's not much rate cutting overseas. But the Fed's going to cut rates. And they had Fed governors out in early June saying we were going to have QE. We're also going to have QE if we need to. Why isn't gold and silver taking off like a rocket? The whole world is saying we're going to print money and we're going to slash rates to negative. Why isn't it going up?
Largely because you have to understand that, that's a sales pitch that's been going on for a long time, for decades, with those in the gold community. But that's not what we're looking at. What makes gold go up? And that's when the confidence in government declines. And we're not talking about just the gold bugs. We're talking about the average person on the street. They have to reach that point where they question what is going on in government. And we're getting close to that. Gallup poll put out, I put it on our blog, that 35% of Americans now say that government is the number one problem. When we reach about 45%, things are going to start getting a lot hairier. And when we hold these, our World Economic Conferences, there's almost about $3 trillion in the room. We have institutions flying in from basically 37 different countries. And, they're realizing, hey, there is a real problem here.
And this is why, is this the reason why gold has caught somewhat of a bid? And, they're not suppressing it down, they're naked short selling it. Is this why gold has caught somewhat of a bid and it's up above 14?
Yeah, look, it's what I've been saying all along is that, the gold bugs are completely wrong. They've been saying, oh, gold's going to go up and everything else is going to crash. Stock market's going to crash, etc. There is no point in history you can point to, you can highlight as saying, see, this is what happened before. That is just not the case. The only time they have moved opposite is when you're on a gold standard. Okay, then, cash goes up and tangible assets go down. But when gold is not on a gold standard and it's a commodity like everything else, then basically it goes up against the currency, and so does the stock market. So you have the stock market at highs and you have gold that caught a bid. I mean, I've been saying all along that you have to have, there'll be a great alignment, and these things have to line up and move together, because we're looking at a situation where capital begins to question the validity of government. When that happens, that's when all tangible things start to rise.
Are we going to get a big debt reset?
Look, eventually, I think so, because I give it maybe to 2021 to 2022. I don't know exactly to what extent. I mean, we've put out some proposals. I've just finished a book we're going to be releasing within the next, hopefully, 30 days or so, called Manipulating the World. And I've gone through everything showing how all they've been doing is trying to manipulate society, markets, economies, etc. And it's just completely failed. But we have to understand that this is post Marx and Keynes. The idea has been that government can manipulate everything, and it's just a fallacy. They've never been able to avoid one recession, and all they ever do is stand up and try to punish anybody else that goes against them. So we're reaching a point where the confidence in government declines. You take these interest rates down, there are no institutions buying this stuff. You know, the only institutions that, like in Europe, that have bought government debt at these levels is because by law they have to have 80%. But now you're undermining all the pension funds. So, I mean, even Germany, you got about 47% of the people that actually work and about almost 24% of the people that are retired. I mean, the pension system in Germany is falling apart. You can't order pension funds, oh, you have to be conservative, so only own government debt, and then at the same time take government interest rates to negative. I mean, honestly, I mean, these people are just a complete disaster. Nobody would ever run any business like this. I mean, it's just not sustainable.
Speaking of Germany, Deutsche Bank. Wow, it's been, Charles Nenner, who also does cycle work, says, wow, if it gets below 8, worried. If it gets to 640, it's going to 0. That's his cycle work. He thinks, but now are they going to prop it up, nationalize it, whatever? Wow, what does that cost? According to William Black, it costs a lot to do that. They got 43 trillion officially in derivative book. What about Deutsche Bank? Could Deutsche Bank suck down Germany, and then Germany suck down the rest of Europe, and the rest of Europe suck down the rest of the world? Could that daisy chain scenario happen, or is that too simplistic?
Maybe a little simplistic, but there's more at risk here. And that is basically that
just had a little freeze. Hold on a minute.
Was forming.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You had a little freeze. Go ahead. There's basically more at risk here. Go ahead. Start again.
Euro was forming.
Go ahead. Start again. You said basically we had a little freeze.
There's a lot more risk here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's a lot more risk here with going on than meets the eye. When the euro was formed, I mean, as you know, I was involved in talking with them back then, and I told them they had to consolidate the debts, and they would not do that because they felt that nobody would vote for it. It would be looking like a bailout for Greece or something. And I said, look, you have to consolidate the debts. If you don't do that, you're going to eventually bail them out at some point in time anyhow. So they would never do that. So the problem you have is that if Italian banks are in trouble, Germany said, oh, well, we can't be sending taxpayers' money from Germany down to bail out Italy. So that's where this whole bail-in thing came about. That so money won't cross borders. Now, in order to do that, Merkel also stood up and vowed that if a German bank was in trouble, like Deutsche Bank, they would not be bailed out either. Well, the problem is Deutsche Bank is the biggest bank in Europe. So what do we do? Um, can she allow Deutsche Bank to actually go down? And then you get into political nightmares here. The one bank that Deutsche Bank wanted to merge with was Swiss, but Swiss are not in the EU, so oh gee, we can't do that. Then there was the question of, well, maybe they should be merged with BNP. Oh, well, they're French, we can't do that. So then it was like, well, maybe Commerce Bank. Well, that didn't work because Commerce Bank has got a lot of the same problems that Deutsche Bank has. So, I mean, we've gotten into this quagmire here where politicians have made certain statements based upon their political ideas, and they're just a complete disaster. I mean, at the Rome conference that we did, where Nigel Farage came, he calls this the alternative to Davos, which is largely true because we actually have to go through and look at what the problems are. But most people had no clue, and these were Europeans. I had a show, I said, what country was denied the right to even vote to join the euro? And nobody could really answer that question. I said, well, the answer was Germany. Kohl admitted he never, if he had allowed it to go into a referendum, he would have lost. So he pushed Germany into the euro, and it was never submitted to the German people to even vote on. The French voted, Belgium voted. Everybody else voted, not the Germans, because they would not have voted for it. So, it's just been a dictatorial posture from the very, very beginning.
So the European Union is the world's big problem, not China, not Japan, not Brazil, not India. It's the European Union that's the biggest cluster, you know what.
Yeah, look, it's the only way to have ever competed against the dollar was you had to consolidate the debts. Now you have a big institution that says, okay, fine, buy me $5 billion worth of euro government debt. You can't do that. They're still back to where it always was. Forget the euro. It's what's the credit risk of Germany versus Italy versus Greece, etc. So this undermines the banking system in Europe as well. In the U.S., reserves of banks are exclusively federal government bonds. Can you imagine if a bank could use as reserves the debt of all these different states?
Wow.
And Illinois is in trouble, and first thing they're going to do is, which bank owns the most of Illinois' debt? Short it. This is the way Europe is. It's like, well, which bank has the most of this? And there is just no security.
This is why money is flowing into the United States.
This is why you got the Dow record highs. You get all these domestic guys, that's going to crash, etc. They don't look outside this country. We are like the prettiest of the three ugly sisters.
Wow. So Deutsche Bank is a problem. Then there's no answer to it. That's what you're telling me. There's not really an answer to it. They've tried to have an answer, but they don't got one.
No, you have to get to the point of a major political reform here. I think we're headed towards that, and it's probably going to explode in everybody's face by 2021, 2022.
You think Trump gets reelected based on what's going on now? Because what they're playing is a game of, put it off. But I've said, just as a journalist, and I'm not you, I'm not doing economic confidence. I'm thinking between now and 2021, as long as, some ship isn't sunk in the Persian Gulf, between now and 2021, the pretending is ending, 2021. That's going to be the end of that. Trump's going to go for a fix on the debt. Am I wrong?
I think eventually, look, Trump has got a problem in that the U.S. always wants a lower dollar, and the dollar is being pushed higher. And people don't get this. They keep saying, "Oh, the dollar's got to crash." If the dollar crashes, Trump is having a great day. All right, on trade, etc. You take the dollar up, that's what puts pressure on the world trade. I mean, the two times we had major crises was 1934, where FDR had to devalue the dollar. It's because the dollar went up to all-time record highs. The next time the dollar went to record highs was 1985. The pound went to virtually par. They created G5, the Plaza Accord, to lower the value of the dollar by 40%. I mean, if the dollar goes down, they're like, licking their lips and saying, "This is fantastic. We'll sell more stuff." And when the dollar goes up, that's when you start getting trade friction.
And that's why Donald Trump is saying we need to cut. He's actually been out in this last week saying we need to cut the dollar. We need to cut the value of the dollar.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why they want it going lower. Jim Sinclair and Bill Holter were on recently, and they think the dollar is going to get cut in half. That's their goal. They want it cut in half. What do you say?
No, I mean, look, first of all, the dollar's got to go up. That's the only thing that's going to break the system. A lower dollar is not going to break it. It's going to only prolong it.
So a high dollar is what is their fear.
Yes, then you'll see, if you take the dollar back up again, you're going to see like another Plaza Accord. Trump's going to be in there. We have to have an agreement. We have to lower the dollar. They're going to try and manipulate it down. This is what they always try to do. A lower dollar, it's very nice. You can say, "Oh, the dollar is going to fall in 50%. This is the standard nonsense, basically largely by gold bugs. And they only look at that relationship, and that's it. And they do not understand what's happening in the world economy. This is really a mess. It's far more complicated than just some simple little relationship between dollar and gold.
And so the warning sign isn't a dollar tanking. The warning sign is a dollar spiking.
Yes, look at why, if in 1987, all right, when the 87 crash took place, all right, as you know, I got drugged into that one as well. So with the Brady Commission, my major accomplishment was to say, look, this was caused by foreign exchange. And you can read the Brady Commission. It's online. Go to the end. It says, well, we think foreign exchange had something to do with it. And they left it at that because it was the G5. I stood up. I said, you people are idiots. You stand up and say, okay, fine. You want the dollar down 40%. You just sold a third of the national debt to Japan. Don't you think that they're going to sell it? And they just look at you with a dumb look. They do not understand what they're doing. And it's pathetic. If you want to go invest $1 million in Mexico, and then Mexico stands up and says, "Oh, well, we're going to lower the value of the Mexican peso by 50%." Are you going to say, "Oh, that's good"? Or are you going to say, "Oh my God, I've got to get out of there before they do it"?
Yeah.
People don't understand. These politicians are complete idiots. And they still do not even teach foreign exchange in university. You can't go get a degree in hedge fund management. I was asked, one of the top 3 universities in the world, I was asked if I would go teach. And I had lunch with one of them. I said, "Why are you asking me to go teach there?" And they actually said to me, "Well, we know what we teach does not work." I said, "That's very nice." Nobody, none of us that have ever actual experience in these fields, nobody wants to go back and teach some classroom with 30 to 50 kids. I don't want to. I said, "Look, I'd be glad to show up and do a guest lecture or something. I am not interested in being some teacher."
Yes, and you're too valuable to do that anyway. You're having the Rome conference, and you're having your Orlando conference, which we'll talk about in a minute, a little bit. But so you don't forecast any crash between now and the 2020 election. But your economic confidence model is saying if there's that there's no crash, and if there's no crash, is Trump going to be elected? Two questions: is there going to be a crash? Will Donald Trump be reelected in 2020?
No, it doesn't look like any type of a crash. Correction, yes, you'll get a fall correction, but I think everything's going to start breaking out really more or less next year. So far, we haven't completed the run on the model, but so far it does still look like Trump would win.
Wow. So no crash and Trump wins.
We're probably, I would say at this stage in the game, we're far better off with Trump there for the next 4 years than anybody else. But, and by anybody else, I mean career politician either side. I mean, the career politicians are complete idiots. They have no clue what they're talking about. Trump, I disagree with him on like trade, things of this nature, but at the same time, at least he has some sense of the business community.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, you can't take that away from him.
What do you? Go ahead.
So I mean, look, he says some stupid stuff sometimes and gets himself in trouble. All right, that's fine. But I mean, do we really want a career politician who's going to still try to manipulate things like like the EU is doing? They think by punishing Switzerland, they're going to like send a warning to Britain. The British stock market and the London market for currency, etc., it's the biggest in Europe. You now want to basically say Europeans can't deal over there? I mean, just watch their economy completely implode.
Do you think we're going to get a Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, or any kind of a Brexit? You think we're going to get one?
Nigel's pushing basically for it. I mean, it's a custom union is people don't even understand what it is. Really a complete disaster. It's like they're saying, okay, fine, we'll remain in the custom union. The EU's custom union is you can't negotiate a trade deal with anybody else. So they couldn't do a trade deal with the United States. Europe still has every control over it. So I mean, it's like you're in, but you're out. I mean, you have no right to vote, but then you can't do anything against Europe. I mean, you can't even, they couldn't do a trade deal with China, or I mean, it's a complete disaster.
Epstein. I want to get into that. I don't know how this shows up in your model or not, but Epstein, wow, could be. I mean, there's people writing this could be the biggest scandal in terms of sex scandal, pedophilia. I mean, he sold his Lolita Express. It's the biggest open sex secret in the world. They called it Orgy Island, Pedophile Island in the press. They called his plane the Lolita Express. You got former President Clinton on the manifest more than 24 times. You've got tons of world leaders. It's a giant, colossal. There's national security implications. Epstein and the sex predator and that kind of thing. Does that have any effect on the global market if this thing breaks the wrong way? I know you're smiling because it's some story.
It's an issue of confidence. It could it contribute to the collapse in the faith in government? Yes. I mean, it depends upon what these prosecutors really want to do. Are they going to try and implicate, Clinton and go further with it, or are they just going to try and, hush it up? I mean, as they usually do. It's very questionable because you have really the deep state, which is very deep. People don't realize how bad this stuff is. I mean, it's I believe it started primarily with George Bush Jr. Before then, I mean, the Republicans would ask me to go interview somebody who wanted to run for president, so I would go meet with them, like with Ross Perot or the governor of Oklahoma who was considering running at the time. And then I got a phone call, said, look, we want you to go down and meet with George Bush Jr. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. But they said, oh, this is different. I said, what do you mean it's different? And, with all due respect, they actually used the word, look, he's stupid. And I said, what? It was like all the other interviews I would do was like, it was really me vetting them out. They would be told that I'm there to tell them about the world economy. And when I would get back, the questions, what do you think? Do you think he can handle this? That's the way it used to be. And then Bush Jr., it was like completely opposite. And then they asked me, well, would you be interested in taking up the position of, the chief economic advisor in the White House? And I looked at him and I said, you nuts? I said, no way. I said, I don't want to go through some sort of Senate hearing. They're going to go, oh, you advise the German auto companies against the, General Motors and all this. I said, no way. I can't get involved in that. And they told me that they had to surround him with good people. So what they were doing, that's how Cheney got in. Cheney really was president. He took us into Iraq and everything else. I mean, you're lucky if Bush Jr. even knew where it was. But ever since then, because Obama was the same thing, the deep state got a taste of power. It suddenly was no longer subservient to the president. They were basically dictating to the president.
And Obama was also a puppet president, you're saying?
Yeah, look, he over 60% of his daily security briefings he never made. He was off running around playing golf with Tiger Woods more than any, it was a joke. But this is what goes on.
But back to Epstein. The Epstein question, that's my question. So you think what Epstein represents is a risk to confidence in government?
Yes, if you start taking down more and more political leaders, okay, then you're going to undermine the confidence in the establishment per se. And that's what our computer's been showing. I mean, the next wave is going to be from 2020 into 2024 will be an inflationary wave. We're completing now the deflationary wave. And so we've had massive, increases in money supply, et cetera, but, we've had no real inflation. And what is inflation to begin with? It's, we've done studies and you can see them on our website. It's very nice, all these people with the interest rates, oh, the stock market's up because they're going to cut interest rates. It's completely absurd. It's really a brain dead even statement to make that. Because if you just look at it, interest rates, take 1929, went from 6% down to 1%. Did the stock market go up or did it go down? It went down 90%. All right, so it's these people they just spout out myths that do not, they've never been true, period.
But your forecast, inflation starts in earnest in 2021?
It's from 2020 on. And what it is, we're looking at cost inflation, all right, cost push inflation, which is kind of more like the 1970s and how that started was the OPEC. So that then raising the price of oil, then suddenly all plastics had to go up in value. So it wasn't demand led. It was cost push. This is what we're looking at here. And it's the same thing with, you have weather, destroying crops, things of this nature.
Yeah.
More cattle died in North Dakota last year than any, year before. And so you're looking at the environmentalists, basically destroying oil industry as much as they possibly can. And then they oppose, nuclear power. I mean, it's just absurd on all these different levels. And what you're doing is you're raising the price of the cost of living on everything. And now you have like Europe, even with this global warming stuff, looking at, saying that you can't have short flights for like an hour or something. I mean, you have to take a train. The power grid went down over there a few weeks ago because they suddenly realized that, okay, fine, if everybody has electric cars, it sounds nice, but the power grid, how do you produce that power? it can't handle it. Um, I mean, it's honestly just a complete joke. People don't understand what they're doing, and it sounds nice, and they just don't know what's going on.
Well, thanks for coming on and telling us what's going on. Talk about your conference in Orlando. We're pushing against 35 minutes, and I don't want to take any more of your time. But Orlando, October 25th to 26th on the martinarmstrong.com website. What's going on? What are people going to give us a taste of what they're going to hear?
Well, basically, this is the setup for 2020 into 2024. The what's going to happen at this stage in the game. It's still the shift at this stage from a public environment to a private asset environment, which is why the Dow's making new highs. Gold's finally starting to catch a little bit of a bid. I mean, all these things are beginning to line up, and so we have a completely different investment, environment coming, and our conference is, I mean, let's say we generally get 30 to 40 different people from around the world. There's usually over like $3 trillion sitting in that room. I mean, it's people are there from all over. I mean, we even get central banks attending. So it's interesting because I mean, I'll put it to you this way. Years ago, when we were going to first open an office in Europe back in 1985, I met with a friend of mine who was the head of the top Swiss bank. And we had a list of names like European advisors or whatever, because I assumed that they were a lot of anti-Americanism over there. And he asked me, he says, name one European analyst. And I couldn't. I was really embarrassed. I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is it. I'm like an arrogant American or something. And he laughed and he says, no, there are none. I said, how can there be none? And he explained to me, he says, everybody uses you because you don't care if the dollar goes up or down. He said, if he's British, it's God Save the Queen. French, Vive la France, And he explained to me something, it still goes on. I get emails all the time from guys and working in the banking industry, and they all say, gee, I wish I could say what you say. If an analyst in a bank in Europe stood up and said, look, the euro is going to go down, it's going to crash, ECB's done this, XYZ, whatever, the ECB would be on the phone and say, fire that guy. All right. Nobody can speak against the government over there. And it's what it is that there's a complete philosophical difference. After World War II, all the currencies were zero. All right. So with the exception of the pound. But you had at that stage in the game politicians saying, vote for me, see the Deutschmark's up against the dollar by 2 cents. All right. That proves I've done a good job. And so the politicians use the rise in the currency as validity for their work. In Europe, that was the way things were done. Now, can you imagine over here if Trump said, well, vote for me because the dollar's up against the Mexican peso? I mean, everybody would go, what? So what? Who cares? All right. So American politicians never used the currency as a political tool. In Europe, it was. So, yes, we became the biggest in foreign exchange advisors in the world because I was here. All right. If I was in Europe, I probably would have been in jail for that. And in 2007, Estonia threw one economist in prison because he came out and said it was going to crash. I think he did 90 days in prison for that forecast. So you can't speak freely over there.
So your conference is going to talk about is a roadmap. Your conference in October is a roadmap for what's coming 2020 to 2024, basically on your cycle chart. What should the little guy do? If you could just give a sentence or two, what should the common person do looking at this information, knowing that you know what's coming and you're saying it's inflation and you're saying it's going to unfold over a pretty good 4-year period? What should the little guy do?
I mean, understand what actually makes these trends develop. Like I said, just look at what Powell said. He's talking about the concerns outside the country. And this is what I've been telling on your show for what, the last few years. I said it's the capital coming into the United States
You have.
because things are so bad outside. This is what he's confirming.
And would your little guy buy gold, stay in stocks, hold cash, buy farmland, buy
Look,
art? What's your little guy do?
I think you're going to see largely um, the institutions buying the farmland. They're doing that for the yield. They then rent it out and get 5%. That's basically what's been going on there. I mean, equities. I mean, keep in mind that foreign capital likes the blue chips. So that you're going to see when the Dow is leading, that's foreign capital coming in. Towards the end of the cycle, that's where the Nasdaq tends to do the best. Then the S&P, then the Dow will lag. When the Dow starts lagging, now you're getting closer to a change in trend. But between here and at least 2021 to 2022, look, the Dow is probably going to go up to I would say at least 33 to 35,000.
Wow, that's a big call. And would you be a buyer of gold or silver?
I think you're going to get a correction back, and then you'll get the gold silver ratio starting to act normal. It's a warning sign at this stage in the game that it's moving opposite of what it would normally do in a bull market. I mean, silver has not done very well. I mean, it's been gold going up, but also keep in mind that that's geopolitical, that all the central banks that are on the opposite side of the table with the U.S., Russia, etc., they're dumping dollars and moving to gold because, look, honestly, if you're going to go into a geopolitical event or war or whatever in the Middle East, the worst thing you want to do is to hold the debt of the person that you're opposing. So you get rid of it.
So with little guys, would you be a buyer of gold and silver? Would you be a buyer of gold and silver now for 100 ounces of gold for a little guy or 100 ounces of silver, whatever?
Look, I don't think it's going to take off at this stage in the game. It's still positioning off, but I think there'll be a correction back to probably 1360 to 1350 area. And it's more of a timing I would look at going into the end of the year. But we should have been looking for a summer rally in here, which was pretty much on point. And then you're going to get some sort of a correction in the fall.
Correction, in other words, correction price of gold and silver are going to go down.
Yeah, in the stock market, I mean, you'll back off, and then you're going to make another thrust up, and then that thrust up probably in 2020 is when it's just going to start breaking out.
Okay, good enough. Martin Armstrong, your website, it's armstrongeconomics.com. I'll put links to all this stuff. Your conference is on the top part of the website on how to do it and where to go. It's October 25th to October 26th in Orlando, Florida. I believe you're living in Florida now. It's not really that close to you, but it's about 100 miles away. But anyway, good luck on your conference. I'm sure it's going to be interesting, and there's going to be lots of cash in the room. And I always tell people, do what rich people do. Don't do what poor people do. Do what rich people do on a smaller scale. But anyway, Martin Armstrong, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Well, thank you for inviting me.